If you didn't see my last video, I suggest you do so, since it sets up much of the thinking process to be applied in this video about large age gap relationships. Consideration of alternatives applies to relationships too. There are many different situations, but I'm going to focus on one main one. Before I get to the usual comments about how the issue is far more complicated or I left out this or that aspect, of course I'm not covering everything. This is a video that, hopefully, gets people to think and maybe make fewer assumptions. It isn't a multi-year scientific research project containing thousands of pages. Heck, part of it is just me trying to sort out my own thoughts on the issue. I have no problem if you have a knee-jerk, negative reaction when you see a young woman married to a guy 30 or more years older. So do I. The difference is that, regardless of my natural reaction, I don't assume I know things about the relationship that I actually don't know. Thus, I won't automatically start attacking them for their relationships. Most of the age gaps I hear people talking about is in the 10 to 20 year range. Personally, while I know the increased risks, I don't worry much about a 10-year gap unless the woman is very young. For example, a 28 versus 18-year-old may be of concern, but 40 versus 30, not so much. But to make sure we are dealing with extreme cases, I'll be talking about gaps that are at least 30 years. So let's look at one example. You see a Filipina who is 25 years old, and she marries a guy who is 55. That's a 30-year age gap, and many will automatically object to it. But the question is it always inappropriate? Or are both sometimes benefiting? Depending on which critics you talk to, some may assume the woman is taking advantage of the man, while others will say the man is taking advantage of the woman. Let's look at both. First, the assumption the woman is taking advantage of the man. At 25, she may be making a calculated risk that for the next 20 to 30 years, she'll be much better off and then inherit everything when she is still only 45 to 55 years old. Of course, the man may live even longer, but the idea is still the same. She isn't marrying for love, but more for security. At least that is the common assumption. Doesn't mean she doesn't like the guy though. Doesn't mean she can't enjoy his company. In fact, at those ages, there's a good chance she does love him. Even though women are less focused on a man's looks than a man is about how a woman looks, they aren't blind to it either. Many 55-year-olds look quite distinguished, even to a young woman. Hopefully, she has also considered the likelihood that in 20 years or so, he may look far worse and have health issues, and still live 20 years beyond that. Her potential husband and the Filipina need to seriously talk about that. In any case, that scenario may be less attractive to a woman just trying to take advantage of an older man. But if the man is already 85, then he may be more likely just to be a target for certain Filipinas. After all, it could easily be 10 years or less before that man passes on. On the other hand, the man may be fine with that arrangement. I've seen some strange statements from bloggers on this. Summarized, it goes something like this. She marries you just waiting for you to die so she can take all your money. It reminds me when I first bought life insurance. I remember saying, so when I die, I get $50,000. I was quickly advised of the fact that I would get nothing, mostly because I would be dead. Same with this. You die and you no longer have any money. You can only have arranged who it would be passed on to. Thus, you lose nothing. Lots of risk though. You can never be sure what the woman will be like after the wedding. She may not care for you much at all. Just as I know men who are having lots of sex with their fiancé, and shortly after marriage, they suddenly are lucky to have sex monthly. There are no guarantees. So, yes, regardless of age, all of life is a risk. Even if both go into the marriage with the best of motivations, things can change. One thing that has really struck me as odd about this is when I've seen some men describe it by saying the woman cooks, cleans, takes care of you, just waiting for you to die. Well, exactly what you expect from a traditional wife, even if the same age. I'm pretty sure you want all those things. The only element that may be missing would be love, even if you are the same age. But if she is doing all those traditional things and being supportive, how would you know what she feels inside? How do you know about anyone, regardless of the age gap? You can't read minds. It is their actions that matter, and the actions described sound good to me. Now, what about the man taking advantage of the young woman? That's a legitimate concern, more so simply because she is younger. If an older guy behaves foolishly, that's not as bad as taking advantage of someone who may be too young or too desperate to make a good decision. A man taking advantage may not really care about the woman. Sure, he gives her a place to live and pays for food, but he may not be very kind, or maybe he expects her to give up a job and be a very traditional housewife. That may be fine, but then he makes no preparation for her life when he passes on. He got what he wants and doesn't care about her life. But she was in poverty, even if she had a job before. Now she no longer has one. She also lost job experience that would help her get better jobs. And she is now at an age where women have a harder time getting a job anyway. In other words, such a man may have taken her temporarily out of poverty, but left her in even worse shape if he doesn't leave her with any insurance or inheritance. Some of the criticism of these relationships is magnified since Filipinas and women from some other countries tend to look younger than they really are. Consider the woman in my thumbnail. To me, she looks like she is in high school. So it would be easy to imagine a 38-year age gap if she were with a 55-year-old. But she is actually 31 years old, thus a much smaller 24-year age gap, and more importantly, she is much more mature and capable to make such a decision. Back to the point about alternatives. The man can choose to live alone, no companionship, or living in an old folks' home. It will vary with everyone, but I can certainly see him feeling that he'd be happier with a wife who will care for him, even if he knows she is mainly doing so for the inheritance. As long as she is, in fact, caring for him. That's his big risk if she doesn't. The younger woman could choose the alternative of marrying some guy who is also in poverty, who she may or may not love. She may get a job, but still be in poverty. The country doesn't have the opportunity that first world nations have. Particularly in the West, we like to think it must always be about love, except that actually isn't true. There's a very long history of arranged marriages, even in the West, that are not based on love. There are old men and old women who have married just to save money. Then there are cases where a woman may fall in love with a man, find out he keeps getting fired, or maybe quitting because the job isn't good enough to suit him. The wise woman realizes that, regardless of her emotional attachment, this isn't the guy to stay with. Then we have people who love someone, but isn't loved in return. Usually they manage to move on to someone else. So lots of cases where love does not decide everything. And for those women I've heard whine about how terrible it must be for a young woman to have sex with a much older man, well, first, they can only speak for themselves. Secondly, it isn't hard to find men who reveal that not long after getting married, they are lucky to have sex once a month. So even sex isn't always a big part of a marriage, which is unfortunate. You might assume these age gap marriages are just transactional, but then what marriage isn't at least partly transactional? We hope love is a key element, but it sure isn't the only element. It's not even required. Like all relationships, there are no guarantees. Both sides have to be careful. It would be nice if both parties are respectful of the other, regardless of what the relationship is based on. I see the problem as being less about the actual age gap and more about whether they treat each other with respect, regardless of their emotional attachment. Hopefully she cares for the man, and he provides for her, including beyond his lifetime, just as in the West with no age gap. While one may take advantage of the other, which can happen in any marriage, we usually won't really know, and we shouldn't assume. If the relationship provides companionship and she supports the man, and the man provides for the well-being of his wife, including her future, as we would expect in a Western relationship, who is harmed? More importantly, what is the alternative? How different is it from an arranged marriage? I do think it is a good thing that society generally frowns on such relationships, just to make it less common and reduce the chances for possible abuse. A cultural discouragement can be good. Judging individual choices without having useful facts isn't. There are plenty of things a person can warn a man or woman about. I've done it myself. But I just pointed to things he should watch out for. I didn't make assumptions. Thanks for watching, and don't let the trolls stop you from speaking out.